I'm Linda Tobash. I'm Senior Advisor for Education here at the Korea Society. And for those of you in the audience and both here and virtually, if you're not aware of the Korea Society and what we do, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan, non-governmental U.S.-based or U.S. agency organization that's solely devoted to promoting better understanding between the peoples of the U.S. and the people of Korea, and a strong understanding of the importance of the U.S.-Korean alliance. We were founded in 1957, so nearly 70 years ago, and it was General Van Fleet, the last general of the Korean War, who established the Korea Society, and that's because during his time in Korea, he fell in love with Korea, and he fell in love with the Korean people, and he came back to the U.S. to say, people need to understand the importance of this relationship, of this alliance. And so here we are 70 years later, still devoted to that mission and vision that he had. We're so happy to be able to co-host an event like this, which really we think is at the heart of what we do, which is bringing Americans and Koreans together to dialogue and to get to know one another and priorities better. So at this point, I'd like to turn the podium over to Valerie Gra, who is the American coordinator for the Korea American Student Conference and can tell you a bit more about what the conference is. And I believe we also, have the Korean coordinator, Ms. Lee, is here with us as well. So 2 coordinators, one for US, one for Korea, and all of the participants. So thank you and welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to first say a great thank you to the Korea Society, who has not hosted us only once, but actually twice this week, and has been so helpful in everything, specifically Linda. Thank you so, so much. To those of you who don't know about our organization, we are Korea America Student Conferences. We're under the parent umbrella of International Student Conferences, and we're really focused on building better relations and stronger relations between Korea and the US. We are an executive committee of 5, basically put together every single year. And what we do as the exec committee is plan the conference for next year. So our 5 group is made up of our treasurer, Isa Infosino, our communications chair, Ainsley Rose, our Korean chair, In-So Kim, and then So-Min Hwang, our marketing and recruitment chair. So we work together collaboratively to kind of address one key issue. And this year we found that key issue was globalized identity in a changing world. So we came about trying to find 5 themes for under each one of our directions. And those 5 themes this year were climate change, human rights and protest culture, economics and trade, art and identity, as well as politics and technology. Then throughout that year, we are constantly talking, meeting with one another across multiple time zones. One of us was in Paris, another one was in Uzbekistan, another one was in Korea some of the time, and then the Americans were on the East Coast the majority of the time. So meeting between our small group as well as ISC, our larger group, and then getting the opportunity to work with our sister organizations, China America Student Conferences, as well as Japan America Student Conferences. So once we recruit and kind of create this delegation, we then meet in smaller roundtable sessions throughout, well, before our conference begins, and then even during the conference. Our conference is only 2 weeks in length, which is an incredibly short amount of time. And between that time, we're also in South Korea as well as in New York City. So if you can imagine the jet lag each one of our students has had is just incredible. As we got into New York, I think Monday or Tuesday around 4 in the morning, when we hit the ground running, 8 a.m. at the Asia Society, going to so many different organizations, having so many great, incredible cultural experiences as well. And each student, I think, has just shown great interest in building this bridge between our 2 countries and even strengthening it. I just want to say how proud I am of this entire delegation. It has been incredible being your American chair, and I have appreciated all of my moments with each one of you. And now I would like to present and introduce my roundtable. I'm so incredibly proud of these 4 individuals. They have, from day one, have been addressing key issues in human rights and protest culture. These 4 students have put an incredible amount of work to present issues on democratic backsliding, as well as the historical importance of college student protests. It's my hope that this presentation will help guide further discussions on this climate and how we can create safer spaces melding mediums of in-person protest as well as over social media. I'm proud to announce Haley, Sage, Zara, and Chesan. Come on up.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Haley.
And I'm Jason.
I'm Zara.
And we are a part of the Human Rights and Protest Culture Roundtable. To begin, this is our central question that guided us not only throughout the conference, but before it and our meetings and towards the curation of this presentation. And our leading question is, what are the new trends and threats to protest culture?
So for this part, I'm gonna talk about the feature of the protest in both countries, Korea and United States. So for Korea cases, we found that the feature of the protest is mainly focused on the pro-democracy, since Korea has a history of the Japanese colonial era, and we had a lot of authoritarian governments, military governments. So pro-democracy was on the top agendas, and which led majority of the democratic process in nation system. So the interesting feature of the Korea protest is that the participants of those protests have become the major politicians, such as Kim Moon-soo, who was the final candidate of the last presidential election, and Kim Min-seok, who is now the prime minister of the Korea under Lee Jae-myung administration. So the main agendas in those protests were regime change, which led to impeachment of the Korean president. Compared to Korea cases, we found that America is dealing with more diverse political agendas and more broader political spectrum. So the one mainstream was huge anti-war protest from the Vietnam War and including the Palestine War recent. And then furthermore, there were war with right of minorities, including LGBTQ, and there were racial justice protests and even anti-globalization. The agendas of the protest reflect the social context that each country has faced. So as I mentioned before, Korea has a history of the Japanese colonial era, and we had a lot of central authoritarian government, and that makes civilian to have sentiment of anti-government, and which is reflected to the people's insights. And as I mentioned before, America has been engaged a number of war around the world, which led anti-war sentiment, and it became the people's insights in the protest culture. So in conclusion, we found that the different trend of the protest and the culture are reflected by different social contexts and that each nation has faced.
Looking at the trends. There have been notable trends in recent protest culture, starting with the demographic in people protesting, increasingly leaning more and more towards young adults. We can see in the data shown here, over the past 3 decades, participation has risen amongst younger generations. In the left graph, you can see how from 2000 to 2017, the number of people protesting in young adults has risen, while in older adults it has decreased. And then in the second figure, we can see how while the amount of people protesting has risen overall, it has significantly risen in a more younger demographic. As participation has grown, so has the diversity, with a wider range of races in attendance, as once again, protests have gained more participation overall. The regions people have come from is also risen as well. Transitioning to social media's influence. After George Floyd's tragic passing in the summer of 2020, over 6 million users began spreading the hashtag Black Lives Matter across numerous social media platforms. On Instagram, users began posting black squares or even changing their profile pictures in solidarity of the injustice, while holding accountability to users who did not do the same. This past month, a nationwide protest, going with the name No Kings Protest, was coordinated entirely through social media, with people gathering in hundreds of cities across the country. To touch on social media trends in South Korea, this past December, as South Koreans took to the streets to protest the past president and his impeachment, people showed up to the protests with light sticks, showing the influence that pop culture has had on the younger generation and the younger generation's participation in these protests. While social media has done a lot for higher turnout in protests, some controversially argue that it has led to a more passive view on justice, believing that change can be made with a simple like or repost of a story. Compared to previous forms of more high-risk protest, such as Black sit-ins during the civil rights movements or South Koreans blocking subway stations to protest accessibility, high-risk protesting has required that people put more on the line. This poses a question: should there be a big differentiation between different forms of protesting?
Additionally, we have to look at what roles institutions play. Obviously, as a younger demographic is the one that's going out and protesting, you're looking at university-age students and just kind of around that demographic for who's actually protesting and what support they're receiving during that time. Both the US and South Korea have kind of opposing views in regards to this. The US historically has a very passive approach. Usually it's going along with whatever administration is in office, and kind of following with the status quo in that regard. However, more recently, there's been a lot more support from universities, and there's also been a polarization from universities in general. The more specific example we'd like to look at in this case is going to be Harvard University. Recent Palestinian student sit-ins and anti-war in Gaza protests have taken place on campus. For the past few years, the university heads and executive committees have been against students protesting in this light. However, this past May, the president of Harvard University actually kind of almost congratulated the students in this graduation speech, supporting them and showing his support, not just personally, but on an executive level. He's reversed any denials for graduation and any academic probations that's been issued during that time in support of these students and their right to protest. Alternatively, South Korea historically has not really been on the side of students. The one university that we want to bring into this light is the Dongduk Women's University. Currently, the administration is considering a co-educational movement, which is completely different from the women's university that it historically has been. And while these students are not necessarily protesting the administration that they're in or the government itself, they are protesting against their university and have received a lot of backlash. Not only are these students getting expelled from school, but they are receiving lawsuits and defamation cases from the university, just further highlighting the kind of stark difference that US and South Korea really faces when it comes to institutions itself.
So how has social media affected the protest culture landscape? Please raise your hand if you know someone who has Instagram or you yourself have Instagram. Oh my goodness, everyone in this room has risen their hand. Can you believe that? So in 2024, Pew Research Center, the main research center in the United States, has stated and shown that over half of all US adults, around 167.5 million users, are on Instagram. And according to the KED, Instagram users in South Korea have doubled over the last 5 years, resulting in 24.3 million users. Change is an Instagram account that has 2.1 million followers, is left-leaning. Republican.Gen Z is an Instagram account that also has 664,000 followers, that is right-leaning and has shown active posts that are actively supporting the current president. And Impact is an Instagram account that has 2.5 million followers and is also left-leaning. These three accounts, though varying in aesthetic or political affiliation, they have an abundant amount of followers, illustrating how the US sort of values this abundance of followers and sort of how the current generation follows these accounts to show that how social media is important in relation to protest culture and awareness. These two accounts, however, are South Korean examples. On the left, you can see this is an account from Ewha University, not affiliated with the university, but just run by students that Somin so gladly gave us as a resource. And they post daejabos, and daejabos are posters that are posted around the university that advocate towards a certain issue. So you can see this movement of physical things that take up space in the university move to online spaces where more people can access them, not just within the university, but those who are willing to support students who are forwarding these different causes. And on the right, you can see a YouTube account of uniquely an American woman who is interested in Korean politics that is right-leaning, but illustrates sort of this wide spectrum of how different accounts, social media accounts in South Korea are spreading awareness that are widely and vastly different from the Instagram accounts I showed you earlier. So South Korea and the US have these glaring differences in how local versus national these accounts are, either having millions of followers or just probably local university students. They also differ vastly in how they are aesthetics, these colorful, engaging posts that maybe are worth just giving a like to or reposting, as opposed to words that direct towards a certain cause. But the biggest similarities are what our RT is interested in. And so the biggest similarities that we see are how they appeal to all of their followers and how they're appealing to calls to action. And these calls to action are not only in an online sphere trying to gather comments or engagement, but also encouraging their followers to gather in physical spaces, bringing this online sphere into a physical one. Problems our RT has identified is the use of generative AI, which differs from just artificial intelligence that is data analyzing or data gathering. And this generative use of AI has illustrated a deep concern around information through the form of deepfakes, but also just the production of it leading to environmental damages. These are different case studies that our RT has pulled. So on the left, you can see a post that was circulated on different social media accounts like Instagram on the form of stories. So these temporary posts that show, it says, "All Eyes on Rafah," which is trying to raise awareness against the genocide in Gaza. And so this illustrates and this presents a problem. And the controversy that followed is the fact that it is a generated AI image. So the controversy lies in the use of generative AI and the environmental damages that are deeply interlinked with the Palestinian cause. In South Korea, this past December, as we all know, when former President Yoon Suk-yeol declared martial law, there was an abundance of misinformation and deepfakes online in the form of YouTube streams or Twitter posts. And what this illustrates is the Korea Times actually gathered a lot of different testimonials that are showing how different social media accounts attempted to debunk. So this is a key demonstration of how misinformation spreads through the use of AI and how it may affect the gathering of people efficiently in protest culture in South Korea.
And so the question begs, so what? Who really cares if people can protest or if they use social media in order to protest? Who actually cares? Well, the trend of anti-protest or anti-culture around protests really demonstrates a democratic backsliding. What this means is that without the right to protest, our ability to produce free speech and be able to let officials know our true opinions as citizens is diminishing, which means that the democratic process is no longer as effective as it normally can be. Hostility growing towards protest culture is another really big trend that is going towards a democratic backsliding, but it also means that there's a silence culture that's flourishing, which means not only are we no longer protesting, but we're, as a society, turning away from protests as a way to express ourselves. With AI misinformation being generated, it also takes away the validity of any protest culture. So any arguments that we would have in favor or in denial of any causes is automatically going to be called into question, especially in regards to AI-generated media. And it overall is a looming threat to human rights. Humans do have a right to protest. We have a right to voice our opinions. And without the support from not only social media, but the younger generations, institutions, and different diverse communities coming together to protest, we do not have as strong of an argument.
So, social media is a necessary and crucial tool to understand protest culture, given issues that our RT has illustrated despite possible concerns of low risk activity and aestheticization. We urge our generation to become more involved to any sort of level, whether it be low risk or high risk, seek out and support policies and groups that support the right to protest and support the right to assembly against growing detainment and deportations. And lastly, take caution against the use of AI and understanding intersectionalities. Thank you. Quickly, our citations.
I forgot to mention it before, but does anyone have any questions for this group? We have a few minutes time for a Q&A session as well. Someone in the back has a microphone that she can pass around.
So you covered about social media and for protest, but I wonder if you covered about social media as a tool of oppression. For example, there is anecdotal evidence in Southeast Asia during some of those protests that some of those protests were actually government plants so they could come in and crush the protesters. So have you looked at any about that, about social media?
Yes, thank you so much for that question and also informing us, because we didn't really look in that aspect. We were really cautious and aware that sites like Radio Free Asia and different media sources like that usually disseminate information towards protests have recently been shut down, but we didn't look into that specific aspect, but we're definitely willing to learn about it. So thank you.
First of all, thank you for your presentation. I want to ask, since all four of you guys are college students and have kind of, since I am from the American side, kind of looked towards protest culture since like maybe high school up until college, have you like personally noticed like any changes amongst your peers in how we now engage with protest culture, especially post like COVID-19 era?
Yeah, so there has been a really large shift, and I think a lot of what our research point towards is that it's thanks to social media that different protests are being able to form better, at least on the American side. That is the main way that we kind of come together in protests. But I feel that it's a lot different from maybe past generations. Well, a lot of what research that Jaesun did was how it was a little bit more confrontational in nature, especially before the 2000s. But just because the shift is towards social media and towards a little bit more virtual gathering to be in person, I don't think that it changes the validity of student desire to protest.
And to just add on to that, I think your question is really good in that it's directed towards us as college students. And I think maybe it's just because we have grown into more protest active spheres just by nature of growing up. But also I've noticed that a lot of the trend is towards like these sorts of intersectional identities, especially post-COVID, with people being more aware of people with disabilities and how they are engaging in different protests and different ways to protest without actively putting your body or safety at risk. So.
Thank you for your presentation. Do you notice any psychological changes, both in protests in Korea and the protests in America? Is there any psychological differences between the protests in Korea and the protests in US?
Well, for the Korean cases, well, I think it's getting easier to engage in protests. Maybe, I don't know, you might see the picture of the Korean protest for the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol, but there were a lot people with light sticks, which make it easy to be, which make it look to engaged in protest with some kids or as a family unit. And then there was like coffee truck that if you say like impeachment, then you will get a free copy, which is like making protest festival or like some like events. And I think that's a very good way to like promoting people to engage in protest. And I think that's making people to get interested in politics, since like these days people are not that interested in politics since it's very like messy. Yeah, politicians are talking about their interest, which is not that engaged in real interest of the people. So I think those changes are the social changes that we can see in Korean case. And yeah.
I'd also like to add, in my research, especially as I looked into high-risk protesting versus low-risk protesting, I noticed a lot of, in America, the trend of cancel culture, it has to be mentioned. And I think while both countries have a lot of cases of high-risk and low-risk protesting, in my research, I just generally noticed more of a high-risk protesting in South Korea versus a rise in low-risk protesting, especially through the use of social media in America. And I think that comes with its own challenges. In America, especially this sense of cancel culture, where there's a general accountability, especially in our generation, rising if you don't speak out for something. So I think in terms of like psychological differences, I feel as in America, it's definitely this trend of you should speak out. If not, accountability will be held.
Thank you. I actually just came from KASC yesterday, China America Student Conference, and I'm really interested in one of the slides that showed the different political groups like on social media. Since my roundtable, we studied perspective and society, and how people make friends and feel together. So I'm curious about anyone's thoughts on whether you think or how much social media might be drawing people together and building communities that can stay around for a while versus like someone might have mentioned the psychological changes that might cause people to like be further apart, since I also heard there's like a loneliness crisis, people not like making friends, not dating, etc. So yeah, just curious about all of that.
Yes, thank you for your question, and congrats on finishing KASC. I think we chose those accounts, at least specifically the American accounts, because they illustrated this trend towards aestheticization, which also lures in a lot of new followers, right? And so it's the sense of community that if you repost something from a similar account, you can be like, oh, that person has the same political beliefs as me. That person believes in the same sort of rights as me. And so I think that definitely is a reason why these accounts are so like beautiful. Like they always have colorful images and they're always trying to do different calls to action. And that creates a sort of different community, at least in the US. And that's sort of the difference we wanted to draw between the US and South Korea, is that South Korea social media accounts at least tend to very differently from the U.S. accounts, which there are different ways of forming community. And as Zara illustrated, it's this difference in high risk versus low risk protesting. And so I think, as you mentioned, there are different ways to form communities based on those different forms of protesting and how active you seem to be on the internet sphere versus the physical sphere. And RIT really wanted to illuminate those differences. But thank you for your question.
So thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. Good morning, everyone. Maybe good evening in Korea. My name is Seomin Hwang. I'm the Marketing and Recruitment Chair of KASC, as well as the leader of the Politics and Technology Round Group. It is my honor to introduce you to my esteemed roundtable group, Politics and Technology. I want to thank this group especially who have showed me creative ideas and amazing teamwork. Today, they will show their hard work and lead a presentation on AI and techno-nationalism. Actually, they tried to create a deepfake video of the current South Korea president to show you how realistic it is, but we were unable because of political reasons. Stay tuned to check which video they eventually use. I will invite Tessa, Bahal, Nai, and Nathan to present. Please welcome our group with a round of applause.
Good morning, everyone. We are the Politics and Technology Roundtable, and today we will be talking about techno-nationalism, specifically how it reshapes global AI power. So today we will be talking a lot about what is techno-nationalism and going over two case studies, one being American elections, the second being Korean elections, followed by AI policy, how current governments and presidents are overcoming this situation, as well as policy recommendations.
Okay, we have a video for you guys. Yeah, there we go. We're going to see about like 20 seconds of it.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. So, for instance, they could have me say things like, I don't know, Killmonger was right, or Ben Carson is in the sunken place, or, how about this, simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit.
Okay, that's
Now-
fine. Thank you. So this is an example of a fake AI generated video. If you were, maybe you were able to, but if you were not able to tell that this was AI generated, that is a big issue. And it's very likely that you've come across countless videos that are AI generated in your journey in social media because of how rampant they are. And now we're going to talk about why that relates to techno-nationalism. So just to give you an idea of what techno-nationalism is, it's an emerging trend where countries have this perception that their state security, economic stability, and just social issues are related directly to their technological abilities. So they're trying to promote the development of different technologies and especially like in incoming investments to kind of help with their national security and economic prosperity. And we're going to understand why that is an issue that we need to focus on and at this point in time. So we see a recent trend, especially with the current administration, of a move towards isolationist policies, especially with the idea of America First, which is an agenda that the administration is pushing, which kind of isolates the country from globalization. And if you want to get a better idea of why that is an issue that we decided to focus on, I would like to quote J.D. Vance in the most recent 2025 Paris AI Summit, where he said that the regulation of AI only helps prevent the development of technology. So less regulation, more opportunity. That is a problem because, again, as you saw before in the video, this is just an example, a small example of what you see every day. And these echo chambers are only promoting radicalism, both in the US and in South Korea. This not only kind of promotes the competing ideologies, which is the basis for techno-nationalism, but also it amplifies those geopolitical tensions at a social level. And now we talked about why it's important socially and economically. We're going to talk about how it impacts businesses and multinationals. That is very difficult. CHIPS Act has been in effect for a while, but Made in China 2025 is very much forcing investments, incoming investments, to have meet certain technological requirements. And because AI is at the forefront of that, and you cannot push technological development without having AI, this is creating a big issue for the MNEs that are operating in these countries. And this is a threat to democracy if not regulated. And that's why our presentation is focusing specifically on one of the most important pillars of democracy, elections, in both the US and South Korea, and how AI-generated videos and deepfakes, which is when you use someone's face to make them say whatever you want, to kind of manipulate those elections. And we're trying to kind of give you some solutions, some policy solutions. So yeah, I'm gonna pass it on.
Okay, so now moving on to American elections. So if you look at the statistic on the left, 78% of people actually believe that AI would be used to actually affect the election outcome. And so there's this huge fear that this AI apocalypse is going to come, whether it be through generative AI or through deepfakes, as mentioned. If we specifically look at Trump's perspective, he was initially very anti-AI, but if you actually look at his social media accounts, he prolifically used AI just in his posts. So if you look at the bottom left, a good example is he essentially pretended that Taylor Swift endorsed him when that was, obviously fake. And the implication of this is that it, can affect a voter's opinions. It definitely warps their perception of what is true and what is not. And so in response to this, there's a public side and a private side of how companies and organizations really try to fight against these negative uses of AI. So the public side focused on legislation, so things such as deepfake detection or just making sure that the public was aware. While the private side focused more on the platform safeguards. So companies like Meta, OpenAI, TikTok, they really focus on either trying to label the content that's generated by AI as AI, or they, essentially prohibited certain uses of AI for, malicious causes or whatnot. Okay, so on the top left, it's just an example of how deepfake detection works. They essentially get the image or the video, and based on a probability, this software could essentially tell you if it is made by AI or not. On the bottom right, it's an example of Google watermarking images or videos made by AI. So that's kind of a way where it's not perceptible to humans, but technology can actually be used to detect if AI was used. And obviously that's very useful in making sure that we know how to differentiate what's real from what's fake. So, if you look at the pictures on the left, this is kind of showing how the AI was used more recently. What they actually found was that traditional means of AI in terms of using this for misinformation for the elections was used more commonly than using AI to create false evidence to change people's minds. So even though these technologies were rapidly evolving, it was still used, very typically, and it's just a tool to essentially change people's mind or essentially create deeper political divides so that both sides are more polarized. So there are three main implications. With the increasing development of technology, it is of utmost importance that there is trust in these systems where AI is integrated with elections. There's also a decrease in decentralization of technology, which essentially means that a few companies would be controlling all this AI simply because those are the best systems. And in the future, it's obviously not good because it leads to a dominance and essentially digital colonialism of AI on weaker countries or countries that don't have as much. And the third, implication is on a both domestic and a global level. Something we have to keep in mind is that electoral integrity and attacks by foreign actors are something that will be, will get worse and it will develop more. And it's necessary to essentially watch out for these even with a greater diligence and just making sure that the elections are kept safe from whatever malicious actors that there are.
In this part, we'll be talking about how artificial intelligence is impacting elections in South Korea. AI is being used by the government for governance, but also misused, especially in areas like political manipulation, election interference, and surveillance. And this dual use raises serious concerns. This is an article about deepfake manipulation in Korea. During the 2024 general election, South Korea's National Election Commission removed 129 political deepfakes in just 18 days. These AI-generated videos targeted voters with false messages, highlighting how fast and dangerously deepfakes can spread. This shows the urgent need for faster, more transparent detection and response systems. In case 2, we're going to be looking at EG's AI detection system in Korea. In 2025, Korea introduced the EG's AI system designed to detect deepfakes in real time. It can catch even hard-to-spot deepfakes made by diffusion models, helping protect voter trust and prevent misinformation. This system represents a step forward in safeguarding election integrity.
경찰이 윤석열 대통령 모습이 등장하는 딥페이크, 즉 AI 조작 영상을 발견해 방송통신심의위원회에 차단을 요청했습니다.
So this was the first deepfake video targeting the president that was viral in South Korea about a year ago. And the original video has since been removed, so what you've seen here is an edited clip by me taken from a Korean news report. As you can see, it doesn't really feel like AI, right? It looks real. And deepfakes are politically dangerous for 3 reasons. First, they manipulate public opinion by making it look like politicians said or did things they never did. And second, they undermine democratic trust. So if people can't believe what they see, they just stop trusting the system. And third, they can be weaponized to spread false narratives and silence opposition voices. This is not just a local issue. Deepfakes spread across global platforms like YouTube and Twitter, making national regulation nearly impossible. So foreign actors may use deepfakes to influence elections, and countries like Korea often rely on foreign tech to detect deepfakes, so it raises concerns about digital dependence, otherwise known as digital colonialism. Finally, I'm going to talk about a national security issue. Election interference creates a strategic vulnerability, and deepfakes are a low-cost, high-impact weapon for authoritarian regimes or cybercriminals. And the lack of global standards leads to fragmented international cooperation. So these factors make deepfake regulation a security priority, not just a technical one.
So now that we've seen 2 case studies, specifically how AI impacts American elections as well as Korean elections, we're going to look at the global AI policy and what's being done right now for that. So in the 21st century, we have many emerging technologies, one of those being artificial intelligence. So when we see artificial intelligence, we often utilize it for our benefit, and as a result, governments have began passively watching us utilize that. Now, it's become more dangerous as people use it to manipulate scenarios as well as stories. So with that in mind, governments now have to find safeguards and regulations as well as how they're going to utilize it for their own security measures. So now it's becoming more of a foreign policy priority, as mentioned here, specifically because AI is essentially the future, but it's also important how we use that critically and safely. So some case examples we'll be going over today are the South Korea's AI Basic Act of 2024, the AI Safety Institute Consortium, also known as ASIC, the theory of techno-statecraft, as well as the Camp David Summit of 2023. So the AI Basic Act of Korea was essentially passed in December 26 of last year by South Korea's National Assembly. This established a national AI committee that regulates AI usage as well as how people are using it and what they can or cannot generate. But however, despite creating safeguards, there's still a lot of regulation that needs to be done when it comes to deepfakes and also algorithmic manipulation, which is essentially certain social media websites or just websites in general, providing curated content of what that person may or may not want to see. So the AI Safety Institute Consortium was created through President Biden's Executive Order 14110, which creates an international coalition of an AI safety regulatory model. South Korea joined this in early 2024, which also follows ASEAN's Guide on AI Governance and Ethics, which is their own AI safety practicum. This promotes public-private partnerships on which we partner with private corporations that generate this AI and AI development software such as OpenAI, Google DeepMind, and more. And specifically coordinating a public-private identity so that we can create good ways to use AI without technically prohibiting it and expropriating it. Now we're talking about techno-statecraft. So the theory of techno-statecraft has 4 pillars, those being promotion, standard, protection, and military, and utilization. Those being how we're setting a standard for AI. What specific document or legislation are we using universally and globally? Those being promotion, how we're going to promote it as part of our foreign competition and also our national security. Utilization, how we're planning on using it for domestic and global politics, as well as protection, what we're using to protect our exports, our materialistic things, and how AI has to coincide with that. 2 statistics I want to mention are there's $700 million invested in South Korea's AI LLM initiative, which basically gives money to private AI development software companies for them to develop their own AI systems in their respective countries. The way it's important for the top demographic is that over 40%, I say over 40% because it's gradually decreasing now, of South Korean exports have to do with the semiconductor industry, that being Chinese technological advancements such as Huawei, ByteDance, or even digital technology exports and development. So this is under fire because the United States, given that it wants to create a better relationship and develop more relationship with South Korea, it's asking South Korea to decouple from this semiconductor partnership with China as they want to create more export-oriented industry with each other. So finally, the Camp David Summit in 2023 with President Biden, President Yoon, and Prime Minister Fumio Kishida essentially started the standard of the commitment to consult. What this basically means is when each government or respective country has a certain AI development or situation, they'll consult each other first to create a more universal standard. However, they've also established plans for annual multilateral summits on AI, not only with the 3 of them to create trilateral dialogue, but also setting a standard for more universal AI summits. So some policy recommendations we have on this, generate a bit of each of what we mentioned. The first being institutionalizing AI diplomacy through more global summits. How many foreign advisors and diplomats, ambassadors are going to create a dialogue and engage with this on a global scale? We need more of this. We can't just have one monumental summit and then have that be it. We need to keep this going, especially as AI keeps developing. As far as I know, as of 2023, AI and ChatGPT was far different from how it is now. So that's what's important. The second, Bahar mentioned this in the global business portion, launching a global AI sovereignty fund. So what a sovereignty fund is that each state has their own state-sponsored investment of assets, how they're going to develop their technology, their exports, their materialistic items. Basically, they're investing within themselves. So we need to launch a global AI investment fund for each of these nations. This essentially prohibits digital colonialism or imperialism, which basically means a centralized form of AI development in which less developed countries depend on more developed countries for AI software. That creates a big power imbalance that we don't want. And finally, coinciding deepfake and disinformation laws. We have to make sure we have a universal standard of what we're using. I know that with DeepSeek, if you ask it one of the 3 T's, it likely won't generate an answer. However, with ChatGPT, it might. So we need to create a standard that gives a similar answer for everything. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. And now we'll have some Q&A session, but we asked them to limit until 15 minutes presentation, but they offered some of time. So we'll just get 1 or 2 questions.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I was wondering if you looked into Trump's AI action plan that came out maybe 2 days ago, which is quite different from what Biden was putting through. So I wonder what your thoughts is on that.
Yeah.
So I don't think I haven't looked into the specifics of it, But I do know that Trump has very like aggressively shifted his, I guess, approach to AI into one where America is going to be like the forefront of this like AI revolution. And I know that he wants to pretty much have like America, because I know, I mean, I'm not sure if you know, but Trump has this a vision, I would say, where he just wants America to be like, obviously the first in everything. So that's why he's doing all these like tariffs and everything to kind of bring everything back to America. So I think this kind of aligns with how he wants to pretty much have America be at the forefront of most things. He's simply just applying that same mindset to AI, and I think that does kind of align with what we talked about a little bit in the presentation of how America is kind of shifting towards this place where we are supporting the companies that are built on, I guess, our soil, and so that is just going to further increase the gap between different AI companies. So although other countries might have their own AI companies, because we're investing so much, Trump wants to really make America be like the center of like the AI world. I think that's just further increasing the disparity, and I think that is his goal, and that is what he's trying to work towards.
So unfortunately, we don't have any more time for questions, but let's give them another round of applause. So, hello everyone, my name is Isa Infacino. I'm the KASC team treasurer and the head of the Environment and Climate Change Roundtable. So over the past month and a half, my roundtable has explored how Gen Z understands and engages with the climate crisis, focusing on themes like climate pessimism and contrasting perspectives between young people in the US and South Korea. So I'm incredibly proud of their thoughtfulness, their teamwork, and the energy that this group has brought to every single discussion. And I'm so excited to introduce Kennedy, Albert, and Minson.
Can we get our slides?
Huh?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you want me to speak? Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. This is our environmental and climate change presentation. Bottom one.
Okay. The photo at the top shows my hometown, Ulsan. I've lived in Ulsan my whole life, but I've never seen this much rain before. Not only in Ulsan, but across South Korea, we are experiencing abnormal weather patterns. For example, in Daegu, already known for its heat, the temperatures are rising even more. And this graph, it shows that the carbon emissions are increasing over time. If this trend continues, it will seriously affect our climate and environment. And eventually, it will have a severe impact on all humans across all generations. We can divide the responsibility into the three main categories: investor-owned companies, state-owned companies, and nation-states. First, investor-owned companies. These companies are responsible for the 31% of all emissions tracked by the database. Second, state-owned companies. These government-owned companies account for 33% emissions. Lastly, nation-states. Emissions that come directly from the countries make up the remaining 36%.
Next, I just wanted to highlight some photos that I found over the internet about climate change and the disasters that they cause. So on the top left, you can see it is a trailer park that's been flooded due to Hurricane Francine, and I believe it was in 2023. On the bottom, you see flooding in Japan, and then I highlighted South Korean forest fires, and then I did another photo of flooding as well.
Okay. Cool. So our main objectives, just like very briefly for the RT and then for this presentation, are or were to address the environmental issues between South Korea and the US, right? And the main environmental issue nowadays is climate change. And we really wanted to conceptualize the views on climate change specifically amongst Gen Z. And to do this, we sent out a survey through our delegate networks and then also our peer networks. And then we also interviewed some of the delegates. And we kind of did this with the goal of hopefully creating some sort of future policy recommendations, maybe not a specific policy itself, but outlining a framework. So we have a video, if you can play this. Oh, get that.
And I'm a student of Seoul University. My name is Phoebe Yoon. I go to the University of Virginia, and I'm a fourth year.
My name is Tessa Aguilar. I'm a political science major, just graduated at UCLA.
My name is Sage, and I just graduated from the University of Houston.
Valerie, and I'm a student at Indiana University Bloomington.
Hi, my name is Nathan Kim.
And in your opinion, how big of a problem is climate change?
I would like to say it is quite big and it is getting bigger and bigger.
I would say climate change is one of the most pressing issues in American policy as well as just globally.
It's definitely a pretty big problem. I want the world to exist after I'm gone, so not really looking like that's happening.
What's one thing that makes you lose faith about where your country is headed in terms of climate change?
So, I would say, actually, I was a participant the Greenpeace, which is the non-profit organization about the environment. I was searching for 환경, which means environment in Korean, and there's not enough policy or the laws about it. So I think I would say so. There's lack of the policy or law.
I think I recently read that there's been a recent decrease in the amount of funding for EV and solar panels, and I think that's just going to make climate change worse.
I think I see a lot of discourse on how it's even if we as individuals maybe reduce our waste or save on certain things, I feel like I hear a lot of discourse about some of the bigger companies. They produce a lot of waste, but there's kind of no accountability on their end.
Is there anything that gives you hope about where your country is headed in handling the effects of climate change?
I think that it's a lot more of an urgent topic for our generation, and hopefully the ones younger than us as well. And it takes everyone to be on board with that. So hopefully that gives me hope.
Thank you.
I think what gives me hope is actually the small organizations within the United States, like the NGOs and just different groups that are all pointing towards the same goal of fighting climate change, but all doing it through different ways. I think it's good that it's very grassroots-esque.
I think that so many people are really getting involved in different organizations. They're talking to other students. It's becoming more of a global issue, and I think with a more globalized and social media era, it's a lot easier now to talk about climate change and to see how it's affecting other sides of the world. So I'm hopeful that people will be able to recognize that it's a really big problem everywhere, and then from that, they'll actually be able to create positive change.
Okay, thank you.
So this is the survey data that we collected. So we sent out a survey through Google. And so we asked our American delegates and our Korean delegates, and we also asked our peers. So the first one is who's most affected by climate change. So if you look on the left for the American responses, you can see how the majority of 77% said that it's low-income households. And then you have rural communities, and then you have minority populations. For the Korean responses, it's a bit different. You have the majority say that it's the younger generation that are most affected by climate change, and then you have the same percentage for rural communities and low-income households. So then we also asked the question of how often is climate change discussed. For the American responses, you can see in orange, it's 57%. They say that they talk about climate change every month, and then they talk about climate change a few times a week, and you see in red, which is 25.7%. For the Korean responses, it's a little bit different as well. You have the majority talking about it about a few times a week, and then you have every month, and then you have in green once a year. The next question we asked was who should bear most of the responsibility. For American responses, it's kind of half and half. They say that the government should be the most responsible, and then the other half is big corporations.
For the Korean responses, you can see the majority is big corporations as well, and then it's split half and half with individual people and the government.
Okay. And then we asked an open-ended question, so kind of the same question we asked in the video, like what gives you hope, what makes you lose faith about climate change. This is just a visual, a word bank of the words, the most commonly used words that people added in their responses. And you can kind of see that corporations and the government, maybe in a more negatively connotated sense, were some of the most common words. And then words like eco-friendly or hopeful or future are kind of less commonly used.
Then we decided to include our open-ended responses. So we asked people we asked our delegates what makes people lose faith. For the American responses, the first one says it feels as if no one cares about it at all. Many people in the U.S. still don't believe climate change is real, and for cooperations, they don't have a lot of consequences. For the Korean responses, I wanted to highlight the bottom one. It says that it feels like all the responsibility is being pushed onto future generations.
Okay, and then just some themes from what gives people hope. I think a common theme amongst all the responses were kind of the young generation, right? Our generation, the next generation of lawmakers or of activists who are advocating for climate change policy. One of the American responses I thought was really interesting was just, what gives them hope is just how many people that care about climate change. And that's like a different factor from previous generations. And even if there's no kind of clear solution for people to point to, the fact that people just care about this issue is what matters. For some of the Korean responses, I'd like to highlight just kind of the more like community-based solutions of just like civic groups or educational elements and in local communities that give people hope or give people inspiration in their own communities.
So just to overall our survey analysis, so we found that people discuss, both Korean and American delegates discuss climate change on a monthly basis. A lot of people believe that their individual actions has less of an impact on climate change. And then American Gen Z believe that the government and corporations are both at fault for climate change. And then the Korean Gen Z puts more of the blame on corporations.
Okay, and then just kind of quickly, why does this matter? Like, why are we even curious about wanting to know what Gen Z has to say about climate change? And I think we have this perception that Gen Z understands climate change, but it's very hard to focus on a single issue on how to solve it, right? Because maybe there's just a lack of faith in corporations or the government, or maybe it's just because it's such a broad strokes issue that it's really hard to focus on kind of a singularity. That being said, because Gen Z is going to be the hardest hit by climate change, this is an issue that we need to focus on, and we need to maybe not change understandings, but figure out how to work around those understandings of climate change into a more productive conversation.
I also wanted to highlight how can we change Gen Z's attitudes towards climate change. So I think when we discuss the topic of climate change, a lot of us have kind of a pessimistic attitude towards climate change. So I think the first bullet point I wanted to say was I think we need to shift the narrative from less of a doom to more agency. We need to be more active in climate change protests on social media and in person. And then also I wanted to highlight community-based projects. Like I said before, I think a lot of people are pessimistic when it comes to climate change, and I think highlighting our community and local-based projects will do a lot in the long run. And then I think also emphasizing the importance of creating small changes. I think when it comes to climate change, we try to focus on a lot about politics, about our government and state legislation. But I think at the end of the day, it's the small changes that we do in our daily lives, in our communities, that will really push an impact and more change. And you always have to start at the bottom before you get to the top. And then I think our generation is already doing this. We utilize social media. And then we also need to address climate anxiety. I mean, I think for our generation, we grew up in a time where you see the clock ticking for climate change. They've put this date and the year that climate change will get even worse and worse and worse. The percentages. So I think a lot of people are scared and we have a lot of anxiety about climate change. And I think once we address that climate change anxiety, I think it will help alleviate the stress towards climate change.
I also wanted to highlight Gen Z in action. So here I have a couple of movements. So the first one you have is the Sunrise Movement. Sorry, they are U.S. and youth-led base. They fight for climate change through grassroots campaigns. The second bullet point you have is Gen Z for Change. They're also U.S. and youth-led base. They use more social media and digital activism. And then I also put Youth for Climate Action. They're a South Korean also youth-led. They kind of target the Korean youth, and they participate in discussions to discuss climate issues, to develop creative and new policy changes. And the last one is actually a local conference of youth in South Korea, 2025. So it happened, I believe in May. So it's relatively recent. They kind of like us participate in roundtable discussions, and they also try to come up with creative policy actions. In addition to this, they participate in climate activism through education, policy, and they emphasize on international cooperation.
Okay, and then let me just introduce our second video really quickly. This is Justin Jung. We met him in Seoul. He's an activist for Greenpeace, and I think a lot of the times, like, we're students, so we don't really have the solutions for everything, but he's someone who's been involved in environmental work, so I thought it was important to get his voice involved for this project.
Hello, my name is Justin. That's my English name. And my Korean name is Jung Sang-hoon, and I'm working as a project lead of well-being economy campaign in Korea, which is we try to work on social challenges as well as climate issue altogether. And my position, I already mentioned that I'm a project lead of campaign, but also I'm senior campaign of the Greenpeace. I joined Greenpeace since 2019. Was a student, also quite like caring about the environment when I was a uni student. We try to engage young people. So actually, we are not only doing by myself, but we also working with some youth climate groups, and we sometimes support them, and we co-host some events with them. So even like last year, maybe like 2 years ago, we did some like hosting for climate movie, which was filmed in America, in the US, with climate group in Korea. So that was also like get a lot of attention, interest from people and youth. Actually, we co-created with like Seoul National University students. We created like the engagement tool, which is not board game, but the board game can like engage people and educate like people about like a climate issue, but also it can generate the solution on climate and social issues. But we co-created with the uni students, and then we will spread it around like Korea. So like that is another like their engagement. Engagement is not only like mobilizing youth, but also we want to get like ideas from like a youth, and we want to empower them. We want to show like there a lot of potential to solve like many challenges. Yeah, I was like born and raised in Ulsan, which is like a second industrial city, and then the city was really polluted, and then I've seen like a lot of killings of the fishes, and then because of like pollution in the water, collectively we united and we made change. Now the water is so clean. So like whenever like we face like a lot of changes, a lot of challenges, but if we do like some collective way of like moving forward, and then we also can make change. We want to move like the decision makers. Sometimes we see like their promise but not action. I think like it's because of like the traditional approach is like a top down. Like if we change like the decision maker, okay, we can change. So we should be like very proactive to move like decision makers, but also we have to look around like our neighborhood and then our friend, and then we'll have to like start from like people around us, and then I think like either have like both a bottom up and top down approach, then we can have like changes and possibilities. That's what I think.
And so I'd like to end the presentation on a bit of a call to action, and maybe just kind of first evaluating our own conferences, climate impact, and just kind of the pros and cons. This can be generalized into other things, right? So pros, we met online on Zoom, used public transportation a lot, and even just like by having this RT, encouraging conversations about climate issues on a more critical level. Cons, obviously it's kind of unavoidable to do air travel in a program like this, but air travel is very climate intensive. And then, maybe with a more focus next time on sustainable development, specifically kind of looking into like the intersectionality of climate change with kind of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, poverty reduction, gender equality, issues like those. And I think going on Justin's point of having a top-down while also having a grassroots bottom-up approach, putting pressure on lawmakers by engagement and participation in critical action like protest is just as important as going from like imagining climate change as a large-scale issue to a local issue and finding ways to get involved at a local level and a community level. So thank you.
Thank you for a great presentation. And now we're going to open up the Q&A session. But as we're running out of time, we're planning to collect one question from the audience. Please raise your hand if you have. And we have someone in the back, so that she's going to pass out the mic.
So I just have a quick question, so hopefully someone else can go. But so you took a survey, so I wonder if you drew a distinction between anthropogenic global warming and just global warming, because one of the reasons for policy inaction in the United States is politicians claiming, oh, it's just a natural phenomenon, and so it's not human impacted. So I wonder if you drew any distinction about that. Thank you.
That's a really interesting point, because I feel like we didn't derive that distinction just because of our own assumption of like, oh, this is going to be asked about human-driven climate change, which is interesting now that you mention it, because like maybe that's something we should have done. I think our assumption was that most people in our generation have that kind of educational background or that just like knowledge background of like understanding, oh, this is like a human-driven phenomenon. Now, if we had interviewed, maybe an older generation, maybe like my parents' generation, I think making that distinction would have been very important. But yeah, that's a very interesting point. Thank you.
Thank you. And can we give once again a big round of applause? So hello, my name is Chloe Kim, the Korean chair of KASC 18. Our roundtable on economic and trade includes Sang Ah-jeon, Gabriel Drinkwine, and Marco Infacino. I would like to highlight the hard work they have put into today's presentation, being so proud to see how they were finding their way out during the entire conference. The topic they're presenting is highly relevant to current global affairs. They have been closely following the news every day to stay updated, and I believe the topic addresses some of the most critical issues today, especially in relation to security and tariffs between ROK and the US. Please join me in giving them a big round of applause as they begin their presentation.
So hi, I'm Gabrielle.
Hi, I'm Sang Ah-jeon.
And I'm Marco, and today we will be presenting on the potential ROK-US trade deal, its potential structure, as well as its key implications for the ROK-US relationship. So the US-ROK relationship is anchored by two core principles, defense and economics. So a bit about the defense relationship between the two nations. So the Mutual Defense Treaty, signed in 1954 by both nations, serves as the bedrock for the two countries' alliance that has now grown into a strong security partnership. So the U.S. partnership in the ROK is extensive. They have around 28,500 troops stationed there right now, which is the third highest concentration of personnel and equipment outside of the U.S. after Japan and Germany. So here are kind of three current security challenges the relationship is facing: cost-sharing pressure with regard to the SMA, adjustment to U.S. force posture, as well as transfer of wartime operational control. And we'll touch up on all three of those later in the presentation.
So recently, the U.S. has named China as its largest security threat, and it's shifted its focus away from
the DPRK deterrence and toward the Taiwan Strait and China containment. With this comes the expectation that allies will take the lead on their own local and regional threats, specifically South Korea with the case of North Korea. And essentially, Trump aims to free up U.S. resources both from and on the Korean Peninsula to focus on the Indo-Pacific theater as a whole.
Yeah, here you guys can see the economic relationship is based on the DPRK deterrence and security and Korea USA FTA. As you guys can see, the US is Korea's second largest trading partner, while the Korea is the America's eighth largest trading partner in 2023. And the blue letter represents the percentage of the FDI the US invest in Korea. And the red one is the opposite one. Here we see the Korea's trade relationship with the US in numbers. Trade surplus has declined during the Trump year. However, since 2021, the exports have rebounded under Biden. This suggests that the Korea's trade surplus might shrink again under Trump administration due to its stronger protectionism. So on the right chart, say the top of the 10 countries causing the largest U.S. trade deficit in 2024, and Korea ranks 8th.
Korea and the US currently have an existing free trade agreement. It was ratified in 2007 and entered into force in 2012. And the purpose of a free trade agreement, and this one in particular, is to eliminate tariffs, to expand trade, strengthen economic growth and cooperation between the two countries, etc. And actually, during his first term, Trump did demand revisions to the FTA, and he even threatened to abolish it. So now we'll go a little bit more into tariffs themselves.
So now on to Trump's trade policy framework. So Trump is leveraging tariffs to pressure countries to form new bilateral trade deals with the U.S. that have more favorable terms. And this is in the aims to reduce the trade deficit as well as bring manufacturing back to the U.S. So the best way to kind of understand this is to look at its 4 key aspects. So one is the National Emergency Declaration, which sets a baseline 10% tariff on all U.S. imports. Then and also sets higher country-specific tariffs, such as the 25% tariff for South Korea. Then there's the July 9th deadline, which has been postponed to August 1st, which temporarily suspended the higher country-specific tariffs, giving those countries a grace period to negotiate these new bilateral trade deals. Then there's strategic leverage. So Trump is trying to use the tariff threat to gain faster concessions on trade imbalances. He's trying to reshape global supply chains to favor U.S. production and exports. So, what's in the agreements? Generally, they vary, but the kind of main through line is that they aim to reduce the U.S. trade deficit, to cut non-tariff barriers to help U.S. exports, as well as align with U.S. restrictions on China. There's also a side note that the free trade agreement partners, such as Korea, are very disadvantaged in these trade negotiation processes, and we can, if you guys are curious, I can go into that during the Q&A section.
So as of 20 minutes when I last checked, there are approximately 20 countries dealing with bilateral trade deal talks with the US, with 5 deals finalized thus far. This week, Japan completed its trade deal, which as a very similar trading partner might act as a template for a potential US ROK deal. Japan got a 15% base tariff. It agreed to open Japan to US cars, trucks, rice, agricultural products, and it even agreed to invest $550 billion US in the US, with the US taking about 90% of that profit. And while it's a slightly different situation as Japan did not have an FTA prior to the deal, it provides the best framework we've seen so far for what the Korea deal might look like, and it also becomes the deal to beat for Korea.
Okay, to summarize it, in the case of the Trump's trade policy framework and the U.S. security realignment have brought the economic and security pillars of the U.S. ROK into the conflict. And then now we are going to talk about the trade deal negotiable. And then, what can we expect in the potential US ROK tariff deal?
So just for reference, the 5 stars means that this is the most likely to happen. So the first thing we're going to talk about is a baseline 10% tariff rate. The Trump administration has repeatedly stated that this 10% global tariff is a fixed national policy rather than a bargaining tool. And the UK deal only serves to confirm this, as even our closest allies are dealing with at least this 10%. And essentially, overall, there's a realization going forward that this is the starting rate for all countries and not something that could be negotiated down.
Now on to sector-specific tariffs. The ROK is pushing for tariff exemptions on its key industries, notably steel and automobiles. But the trade deficit remains at the center of the bargaining. So the U.S. is willing to grant these tariff exemptions in exchange for a concrete plan to reduce the U.S. trade deficit. And just some context, in 2024, there was a record trade surplus between the U.S. and the ROK, which was up 25% from 2023. So there's just kind of gives some context to the urgency of the Trump administration of wanting this kind of sectoral rebalancing. And while there has not been kind of a concrete plan released yet, in the media they've talked about potentially using shipbuilding cooperation or increasing LNG imports to reduce that trade deficit.
America is arguing Korean chip makers to limit advanced exports to China, which is the Korea's first trading partner. This pressure could pose retaliatory risk from the China, like thought before. And so also this pressure needed to reshape Korea-China relations. And then incentives can be received for joint US ROK, semiconductor, car, steel, investment like Samsung, SK, Hyundai from the US.
So shifting a little bit more towards U.S. security requests, as the U.S. begins to focus more on China containment, as I said before, the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy demands strategic flexibility, and there's been interest in a reduction or repositioning of some USFK forces. There are severe concerns with this for South Korea, as it doesn't particularly view Taiwan as existential to its own security, and as well as repositioning and strategic flexibility might show U.S. neglect. And while the ground threat from North Korea is very low and a slight reduction of troops might be possible, a sudden and public reduction would significantly weaken trust in the alliance, and it might even embolden the North. The focus, we think, should really be on deterrence and securing South Korea under the U.S. nuclear umbrella, while gradually allowing USFK to move towards strategic flexibility and a wider Indo-Pacific strategy.
Here's the last one we expect in the potential US ROK tariff deal. SMA, the Special Measures Agreement, is a defense cost-sharing arrangement, but it is now being used as a negotiation chip in the trade negotiations. Trump has criticized the Korea contribution is inadequate and insufficient, pushing for a negotiation. But legally and politically, those constrictions limit how much renegotiation can actually proceed.
Next is the OPCON transfer. So the U.S. has held wartime operational control of South Korean forces since the Korean War. And just a bit about the current status right now, the transfer follows a conditions-based approach and has no fixed timeline. And this is the first time both sides seem committed to transfer at the same time. So why does this matter? The Trump administration favors OPCON transfer because it would allow the U.S. to potentially reduce the U.S. troop presence in Korea. And for this reason, it may be leveraged in trade talks to shift the defense burden onto the ROK. And some concerns for South Korea are that this could lead to U.S. disengagement after OPCON, doubts over ROK's military readiness, as well as worries about the alliance weakening. And while OPCON transfer symbolizes greater sovereignty for South Korea, pushing for it now, especially under a U.S. administration that is very keen on reducing the troop numbers in South Korea could be Seoul shooting itself in the foot.
Now to discuss the wider implications of this. So starting off with geopolitical threats, there are multiple threats beyond economic ramifications. Starting off with security cooperation, there's this reduced political trust, there's this difficulties in cost sharing and burden sharing, as we've discussed throughout the presentation. There's also some geopolitical alignment concerns, as there is trade instability in South Korea, and that could prompt Korea towards exploring hedging strategies, especially with China and ASEAN. There's also a large threat to multilateral norms. As this does bypass an existing FTA, it weakens a shared liberal order that this alliance and many other alliances depend on. And a wider issue is with South Korea regional reputation, as if Korea comes home with a worse trading deal than Japan or other regional neighbors, this could definitely promote domestic backlash and also empower anti-US voices in the region.
And here is the threat to economic relationship. With trade accounting for nearly 90% of the Korea GDP, the economy is highly exposed to the shift and change in the U.S. policy. Trump's America First tariff and the threat of mutual tariff have directly threatened the main export sectors in Korea, like steel, EVs, or semiconductors. It also serious risk to bilateral economic relations.
Now bringing it back to kind of the day-to-day Korean and American and how this potential U.S.-Korea trade deal could affect them. So this is an example of Samsung's best-selling iPhone in the United States, showing kind of what a 10% tariff rate and a 25% tariff rate, how much it may increase the prices. This is taking into account, in this scenario, we're saying that the producers passed all of the costs of the tariffs onto consumers. And this is just another example of Kia's best-selling vehicle in the United States, the Kia Sportage, and just in red you could see just how much the cost has increased from the original $32,000. Now, bringing it to the Korean consumer, if the Trump administration's security goals move forward, such as the renegotiation of the 12th SMA, as well as the successful OPCON transfer, this would put a strain on the ROK's government budget and may result in higher taxes, less funding for education, healthcare, housing, as well as potentially fewer subsidies or public benefits.
So just to conclude, tariffs are a lose-lose situation for the U.S. and South Korea. It undermines all aspects of an important security and economic relationship, and it also signifies a shift in U.S. policy away from a shared liberal international order and towards isolationism, protectionism, and mercantilism. And while this is unlikely to be the beginning of the end for the U.S.-Korea relationship, it creates cracks in its foundations, and it also disservices consumers and citizens alike in both nations. So thank you, and if you have any questions, wait, where's our thank you slide? There. Thank you, and if you have any questions.
Thank you once again for a wonderful presentation dealing with the current issues right now. So now we're going to be opening up the Q&A sessions, and we might be collecting 3 questions from the audience. Please raise your hands up if you have any questions. We have our Easy Soman back to hand out the mic with Ainsley. If not, it sounds our presentation was perfect, and now we're going to be moving on to the next.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ainsley Rose. I am the Communications Chair for KASC 18, and I also had the honor of leading the Art and Identity Roundtable. This year, I challenged my delegates with exploring the intersection of art and identity, 2 complex and deeply personal concepts. Throughout the journey, they have worked tirelessly, exchanging ideas and sharing their stories, which led to powerful conversations about diaspora, resistance, and belonging. I'd like to take a moment to thank Hayen, Phoebe, Trinity, and Precious for their dedication and insight. I'm so proud of each and every one of you. Good luck, and here is the art and identity presentation.
Good morning, everyone. We are Art and Identity Roundtable. So my name is Hein Kim.
I'm Phoebe.
I'm Trinity.
Today we explore three fundamental questions about Korean American artists' expression. First, how do Korean American artists use their mediums to express their identity? And what historical, cultural, and political factors shape their identity? And last, why is art uniquely suits to explore and communicate these experiences? Through the work of visual artist Yong-sun Min, architect David Hyun, filmmaker Justin Chon, and musician Yoon Mi-rae, we will examine how each artist navigates the complex terrain of Korean American identity through themes like diaspora, belonging, resistance, hybridity, and cultural memory. So our main argument is this. Korean American artists, representing a variety of disciplines, use art to negotiate and investigate identity, while showing how identity is shaped by the intersection of history, culture, and politics and personal experience.
So here's a brief overview of Korean American history and how we can navigate their identity through history and art, starting from 1910 to 1945 Japanese colonization of Korea to present day. The artists that we discuss will cover important moments spanning over multiple decades in Korean and American history that is shown through their artwork and how their identities have been shaped by such events.
So the first artist, her name is Yong-sun Min. She was born in Korea, but she moved to the United States when she was 7 years old. She identified herself as a Cold War baby, carrying the weight of geopolitical tensions that shaped both her homeland and her new country. Her Korean American identity became an act of resistance against singular cultural belonging, as she refused to be confined to either Korean or American categories. Instead, her artistic practice emerged from the liminal space of diaspora, where home becomes a question rather than a place. So this is the representative artworks of her. So Min's photographic work of North Korean artifacts captured in DMZ exhibition spaces, alongside with South Korean visitors in the last picture, became a site of cultural resistance. Through her lenses, she challenged dominant narratives about Korean identity and unity. Her linguistic experiments, our home, like she wrote it in Korean, and we, which means why in Korean, embodied the diasporic condition of existing between languages. These hybrid works resist the pressure to choose between Korean and English, instead creating a third space where belonging could be reimagined. So this kind of structure is quite interesting. So in these photographs, Min deliberately positioned herself as an outsider, a Korean American observing South Koreans gazing at North Korean artifacts. So this triple displacement became her method of resistance against expectations of automatic cultural belonging. She articulated her identity confusion not as a personal failing, but as a form of diasporic consciousness that resist insertion into simplified narratives of Korean division and ethnic unity. So to explain more about it, this positioning reflected her resistance to the homogenic cultural home promoted by South Korean nationalism. Despite sharing the same ethnic heritage, The idealized narrative of Korean reunification, with its emphasis on territorial and cultural purity, could not accommodate her immigrant experience or hybrid identity formed through diaspora.
So the next artist we wanted to discuss is David Hyun, the first registered architect of Korean descent in the U.S. The style and function of his works reflect his meditations on Asian American identity and the contingent and social economic citizenship of Korean and Asian Americans in the U.S. The first project of Hyun's that I want to discuss, which never came to be, is Korea City, an architecturally distinct community proposed for construction in LA that Hyun was tasked with designing. The hybridity of the proposed design of Korea City most clearly manifests in Hyun's choice to incorporate roofing details commonly observed in the Hanok into the design of a skyscraper intended to resemble those found in other parts of Los Angeles. This hybridity mirrors the blended and not so clearly defined or easily quantifiable nature of Korean American identity. Elements of architectural styles from both Korea and America are reflected, not as two separable forces, and they're crucial to shaping how the buildings are perceived. And in terms of design, Hyun's incorporation of other East Asian architectural forms and techniques speaks to Korean American identity as one that is not clearly defined solely along a linear spectrum, with Korean forming one side and American the other. The inclusion of other East Asian architectural techniques suggests that Korean American identity possibly involves navigating an affinity to other more expansive categories, such as Asian American. Finally, the project's intended function as a community marketplace and a display of Korean American contributions illustrates that navigating Korean American identity can, in cases like this one, assume the form of seeking acceptance of one's Koreanness in the United States. Next, the significance of the McTurnan House lies in who Hyun dedicated it to, which is John T. McTurnan, a defense attorney who shared a working relationship with the attorney who defended Hyun's right to remain in the U.S. In 1954, Hyun, who had resided in the U.S. for over 30 years, was detained and forced to go through deportation hearings under the McCarran Act, which enabled U.S. authorities to detain undesirable aliens suspected of harboring communist affiliations. And his experience demonstrates that despite one's self-identification as American, one's claim to belonging or even one's physical presence in the U.S. is uncertain and subject to reversal at any moment. And Korean Americans were treated as perpetual foreigners, and Hyun's choice to commission a distinctly Korean American architectural project for McTurnan serves as a symbolic resistance against Korean Americans and Asian Americans' relegation to forever foreigner status. So Justin Chon is a Korean American filmmaker, actor, and a writer. His works highlight the complexities of belonging, the weight of generational trauma, and the impact of systemic injustice on marginalized communities. His filmmaking style draws from both American independent cinema and Korean visual traditions and merges grounded realism with more poetic elements. I will now show you a clip from his film Coop.
Hey Keith, can you tell me something good about Mom? What was she like?
She was always helping others out.
Do you think she's still watching over us?
I mean, look around us, yo. Ain't nobody watching over us.
Get out.
It's just us.
We don't serve your kind here.
Black people?
Nah, ugly little kids.
You're fat, let me in.
I don't think you understand how comebacks work. Doors open, genius.
Why are you always hanging around a place anyway?
Who protect you guys? No one in this neighborhood likes you.
This is with the sale and the discount.
There's taxes on these things.
You people always trying to rip us off.
You people.
Ah, that's true.
Can we skip to timestamp 1 minute and 3 seconds?
I've ordered the jury verdict, and I've ordered the Justice Department to help restore order in Los Angeles.
Yo, what does that even mean?
Oh, gook? In Korean, it just means country.
Hey, Camilla, get your stuff. You've been going down to them gook stores. They're not your friends. They're using you.
They treat me like family.
Family?
Whoever said love don't cross the thing line, I couldn't begin to tell you about all of the things I lost. It's not just you, it was me too.
Can we go back to the slides, please? So
The film is shot in black and white, and this visual style reflects both the bleakness and moral ambiguity of race relations in America. Thematically, the film engages with Han, which is shown in the brothers' grief over their mother and their isolation within a racially tense environment. Chong emerges in the emotional bond between the trio who offer each other comfort across racial and generational lines. The film critiques the Korean immigrant dream, exposing how diasporic identity is shaped not only by survival, but the need to resist systemic racism and assert one's place in a hostile society. While the brothers try to keep their father's failing shoe store alive, they're also navigating American ideals of independence, survival, and the American dream in a world that treats them as perpetual outsiders. Their struggles reveal the fragility of belonging, how for diasporic communities, it is something that must constantly be fought for, protected, and redefined. The use of the gritty handheld cinematography adds to this sense of instability, urgency, and the precarity of their place in America. Now I will show you a clip from Blue Bayou.
I'm not leaving my family.
What time is it?
It's early. I got Jessie fed. I'll get her to school.
You sure?
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, got it.
Okay.
Antonio LeBlanc. How you get a last name like that? I was adopted. Is that where you were today?
Yeah, why?
Oh, nothing. It's a good choice. Come on, let's go. Where you from? I'm from about an hour north of Baton Rouge.
Can we skip to timestamp 1 minute and 2 seconds?
Born. I was born in Korea.
Hey, where you going? Where you going here? Hey, isn't that your kid?
Let's go.
Hey, did I say you can leave? Stop. I'm gonna tell you one last time. Okay, that's it. Let him go.
I posted bail. He should have been out by now. He's not here anymore. ICE took him. What? I just don't understand how they can deport him.
I was brought here when I was 3.
Can't we do something about this? I mean, listen to him. Look at him. He's American.
ICE is targeting people like you, adopted or not.
I've been here for over 30 years.
Can we go back to the slides, please? So visually, the film contrasts warm, saturated tones with harsh realities. There are dreamlike sequences in a Korean landscape of Antonio's memories of being in Korea as a young boy, and there are also Korean lullabies that are layered over southern landscapes. And these kind of evoke the fragmented nature of diasporic identity and blends cultures that never fully belong to either. This poetic realism kind of echoes the work of Korean authors like Lee Chang-dong. So in the film, Han is very central, and it's expressed through Antonio's deep emotional pain, abandonment, and internalized shame. Chong is shown in his steadfast love for his wife and his stepdaughter, and his quiet resilience in the face of a looming loss. The film frames Antonio's life as an act of resistance against a system that seeks to erase him. As an adoptee and a non-citizen, his identity exposes the contradictions of American values, particularly the myth of belonging for people of color. His story speaks to the trauma of the diaspora and how identity is not just inherited, but constantly negotiated in the face of exclusion. Antonio's character is Korean by birth and Southern by upbringing, however invisible in both worlds. He represents the fractured, often unrecognized narratives at the core of the Korean American experience.
The next artist that we looked at is Yoon Mi-rae, also known as Natasha Chantarade. She's a Korean-American R&B and hip-hop artist, and she was born in Texas to an African-American father who was a U.S. soldier and DJ stationed in Korea, as well as a Korean mother. Her multicultural background deeply informs both her identity and her music. As a pioneer in Korean hip-hop, she uses her platform to explore issues of race, belonging, and personal resilience, especially through her lyrics, which often switch between Korean and English, mirroring her bicultural experience. Released in 2007 on her self-titled album, T3 Yoon Mi-rae, Black Happiness is one of her most clearly autobiographical songs. It was written by Tiger JK and produced by an underground producer, The Quiet. The song explores her experiences of growing up biracial. It also explores the complex exclusion that she experienced when being given a seat at the music table, but still being told to wear a mask of white makeup and facing gossip just because her father was African American. Through a mix of rap and what she personally calls a soulful sound, including a spoken English message from her African American father, she resists identity silencing audibly and pointedly. Black happiness resonates with both Korean and American themes, revealing the contrast between both and also showing the possible harmony between these themes. First, it explores Han, this loss of identity and sorrow from this sort of inherited grief. In those lyrics you see right on the left, where she mentions seeing her mother's sadness and that becoming part of the reason why she was constantly cheerful as a child, as well as the loss of identity that's associated with her being asked to wear a mask of white makeup. The song also embodies Jong, this cultural affection that is shared between people. It's a belonging, it's shared comfort. And she raps, I lead music so we can lean on each other and comfort our loneliness. The American values of independence and personal freedom are just as present, reflected in lines like, never let nobody tell you that you can't do it. Now I'm free, it's on. The line, you have to know and you have to believe with all your heart that things will always get better, reflects hope and the pursuit of happiness. She's known as the queen of Korean hip hop, and because of that, she has this unique position which is utilizable as soft power. And with that, she resists erasure and rewrites narratives around race and identity in Korea. Yoonmire presents music as both a refuge and a tool for self-definition. When she says, when I hate the world, music comforts me, she underscores how music, that is art, helped her cope with prejudice and helped her navigate her diasporic identity. The line, you gotta be able to blend both of those in your life, is from her father's message, and it openly embraces the need for diasporic integration and not just assimilation, because assimilation can equate erasure. Her work represents not just resilience and transformation of ideology, but it represents that her Korean American identity is not just a theme, but it's a lived, evolving truth.
So art matters because it is a form of expression that is not tethered to a particular national language, and it operates for the most part beyond national boundaries. This quality of art makes it an especially useful medium for individuals negotiating belonging and identity in nations that have employed legal and even linguistic measures to exclude and marginalize them. It also positions art as an ideal medium for fostering exchange and understanding, as one does not need to fully grasp a specific language to comprehend an artist's message. Art has also allowed underrepresented voices to enter spaces and conversations where they have historically been suppressed. For instance, biracial voices, which have historically been disregarded and dismissed, have gained representation in the Korean music scene through artists like Yoonmire's songs, which capture the complexities of mixed race identity. Lastly, art, embodying multiple forms and capable of conveying a vast array of messages, allows for depictions of America beyond white Anglo-Saxon Protestant America. And as we will explain more, defining America beyond WASP is critical in spaces like KASC, which are designed to facilitate understanding about Korean America among Korean and American students.
Like Trinity mentioned, KASC is this formative platform for career identity as well as a summative assessment of personal and national identity. Therefore, we recommend continue to include programming that balances the policy and security focus of KASC with the artistic and humanistic perspectives. That includes some of the experiences we had, like experiencing Hwanghae-do traditional music. And we also recommend that Korean research-focused institutions like the Korea Society continue to house and exhibit art like this one that's housed right here behind us. And we also recommend that KASC executive committee members, because of that sensitive position of having to curate this cohort, continue to think about how they are representing Korea and America in both the cohort and the programming that we have in this cohort. Finally, we also recommend that KASC could have a sort of digital recording of the identity of the cohorts each year, like that.
So to conclude, we wanted to revisit the questions we posed at the start. So first, through their experimentation with photographic, architectural, and filmic techniques and songwriting, Korean American artists are able to voice previously sidelined interpretations of history, grapple with cultural memory, and contest the political status quo to convey the hybridity and multiplicity of Korean and Asian American identity. Second, across the 4 works we have selected, Korean and American historical events have played a pivotal role in shaping Korean American artists' articulations of their identity. In the US, the structural exclusion of Asian Americans through discriminatory immigration laws and silently operating barriers like the bamboo ceiling has prompted artists to resist their construction as perpetual foreigners. Ongoing uncertainty surrounding the citizenship of Asian individuals in the US and fraught race relations also influence Korean American artists' reflections on their identity. Korean historical and political considerations, such as that of reunification of the Korean Peninsula, also shape Korean American artists' identity formation. Finally, art is uniquely suited to explore and communicate these experiences as it transcends national boundaries and the limitations of language and gives weight to underrepresented voices in spaces they have historically been barred from. Moreover, while there is much more progress to be made to improve the accessibility of art, because it is so expansive, is able to be appreciated, absorbed, and built upon by a relatively wide audience. And thank you.
Really great job. I was really enthralled by all the presentations and specifically the videos you guys chose as well. We have time for like one question, but don't worry, we will have a little bit of time after we give certificates to all the delegates for like just some talking and a little bit of networking, hopefully, before our 12:30 event as well. So does anyone have a question? Someone has a microphone in the back. And so does Inso.
Thank you guys for your presentation. I really see how far this presentation has come since Midpoint Forum. I wanted to ask sort of how you decided to land upon these specific Korean American artists. Was there particular reasons why? Like, I know you mentioned the architect was like the first like registered Korean descent of like in the Architect Association, but I wanted to have some insight into maybe the other choices.
So we were first grappling with what even topic should we do, because art and identity is such a broad topic. So we were originally focusing on film. However, we decided to kind of go into each of our individual interests. And so we all individually chose an artist under the medium that we were interested in. So for example, Hain is a great artist. Like, she has like amazing drawings. So she was looking into more visual art, and like that's kind of how we kind of narrowed it down. But also because there like hasn't really been, Korean American history is relatively new compared to other identities in the US, and so there definitely is kind of like that lack of representation in the art world, and kind of like not enough sources, or I guess things we can draw from. So I think a lot of our personal experiences and like our personal interests kind of led to us choosing our artists. However, we definitely did try to have kind of as much of a diverse range across like decades and also mediums as much as we could.
Okay, really great job, everyone. Right now, we're going to go through certificates for all the delegates. So can I have the art and identity group just staying here? Okay, so art and identity was led by Ainsley, so she's going to present you all with your certificates. So can I have Precious Alamu, please, first up? Then Haeun Kim. Trinity Tai. Phoebe Yoon. And then if you can all stand up for one group photo as well. And everyone give them a round of applause. All right. Thank you so much. Now, I mean, C comes before E. Okay. Oh, sorry. No, climate change. Okay, we're good. Sorry. Okay, economics and trade was by the Korean chair. So In-so Kim. Okay, so first up, Gabrielle Drinkwine. Sanga Selena John. Marco Infosino. All right. And then, okay. And then a group photo with everyone looking at Yujung. Awesome. Sorry, I forgot I was in fire event. All right, next up, environment and climate change by our treasurer, Issa. So first up, Kennedy Bagley Fortner. Minsun Shim. Then Albert Cheng Yu. And then if we can get one group photo with Issa in the middle, maybe. Awesome. Very good. All right.
Now we're going to go for the Human Rights and Protest Culture Roundtable. So first we got Sage Anzueto. Haley Suna Chung. Zara Sarwar. And Jason Yu. Group photo? Yeah.
All right, last but not least, we have politics and technology with our marketing and recruitment chair, Somin. So first up, Tessa Aguilar. Next up, Bahar Hassantosh. Then Nathan Kim. All right, then Nali Shim. And then one last group photo with Somin in the middle, please. And those are our KASC 18 delegates. Congratulations, everyone.
Congratulations to all of you, and what fantastic presentations, really. We all learned a lot, and it was clear that this was a very productive 2 weeks for you and a great experience. So again, we're concluding one program right now. I guess, what do they call it, a double header when you have two games in baseball? So we have a double header today in just about a half an hour, a little bit less, 25 minutes. We'll be starting our next program, which is the armistice. Again, we're going to have a number of people who are joining us. So I do have to ask if the KASCers, right, it can make sure you're just in one seat, because we're going to be needing all the seats that we have. But really fantastic job, and what a delight to work with you this week.
Thank you.